Now there we're joined by Baroness Pauline Neville-Jones, the former Minister for Security and Counter-Terrorism. Very good evening to you. Thanks very much for being with us. Now the report's called A Question of Trust. To what extent do you think it goes to reassuring us that security services aren't and won't snoop on us unnecessarily, and that there'll be enough checks and balances in place to protect us?
Well, I think one of the things that David Anderson's report does is, in fact, to say that nothing that's going on at the moment is unlawful. But what he does say, as your report pointed out, that the law, which has been amended several times, not easy to follow, you have to have a lawyer to do it, it's not clear. We need to inspire confidence and trust in the public, you need to have clear law and much greater transparency. So that's one. So let's have a new law in the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. That area. Secondly, he's saying that and this is a big change, and it will be a big change for the government, that the warranting process should actually now be carried out in effect by judges and not by the Home Secretary on her own authority. She will still make the application, I think, but they will actually be responsible for deciding whether that interception that's being asked for should take place. And then there is the third part of it, which is the just trying to think what the third thing is, but there is another big element in the Act where I think he thinks that the powers themselves are not as well set out as they should be. He also makes the point, which is I think going to be a point of contention for the government, that he doesn't think that the case has really been made for the retention of data on third parties. And that is part of the Data Communications Act that the government does want to bring forward. What he's saying, he's not saying you can't make that case, and he doesn't say that the case is not justified. He does say it hasn't been made and needs to be made.
That last point that you made, that's the so-called Snoopers Charter part of it, isn't it? That's making every provider or people that we use on retain
data, yes.
So it's about actually not the information in emails, it's about the wider context, isn't it? So the browsing history.
Yes, and there is a real issue here, because it's all very well telling governments, as he does, that it is legitimate and necessary for national security and criminal and other purposes, actually, to be able to have a warrant to do this interception. What the government's going to say is, that's all very well giving me that power, but you do actually need to allow me to avail myself of the information. I've got to be able to get at the relevant information. So there will be a point of contention there, I think. And the government is, what David Anderson is saying to the government is, you must make this case. You must make it clear to people why this is necessary. So I think what he's saying is you've got to do something about this very deep anxiety that does exist in some quarters about privacy, about security, and about the proportionality of government power in this area.
So given that he obviously thinks the government's failed to make their case in this matter, do you think the balance has been wrong here?
No, these powers don't exist at the moment. So, I mean, I think what he's saying is you've got to make the case in order actually to reassure people that actually this is a proportional and necessary power. So he's partly in the game. I think a lot of his report, in a question of trust, it's about actually laying down a law and a system that's really going to command public confidence and respect, and not be increasingly, as it is, a source of controversy and the undermining of trust.
Do you think that government should be allowed to collect this data? Do they need it?
Well, I personally do think that there is data there that actually is important.
Why?
Why? Well, because increasingly, people, the way you actually get to know and able to intercept and stop, because this is the problem. In the past we used to have crime of a kind. Well, you could deal with people after they'd done something. We now have potentially such horrendous crimes around, including terrorism and long organised crime, where actually the name of the game is to disrupt people and prevent them actually doing it. The only way you can do that is getting hold of information, before they actually act. So you do have to. They communicate on the internet, and they communicate in social media. So you've got to be able, to be able to penetrate that. But, for your and my safeguard, we need to know that that's only being done in a lawful way, or only being done proportionately, only being done necessarily. And that, I think, is what David Anderson is really getting at. Let's have a system that really commands confidence. And he is transferring certain powers to the courts for that.
What's your view on the recommendation to strip ministers of their power to issue interception warrants and give it to judges? Because the Prime Minister's spokesman has always suggested this could be problematic. Do you think they should be handed over?
You can perfectly well make a case for it continuing to be an act that is a political act. David Anderson has come down on the side of judges doing it. Now, I would say, I actually support that. Why do I support that? Not because I think that ministers have abused their powers, but I do think that in the current climate it's very important to command confidence, and I think that will increase people's confidence in that this is a properly regulated system.
He also said in his report that the agency's capabilities should be made more public, as in we should know more about what they do and how they operate. Obviously that's going to then give information out there to people we don't necessarily want to have that information, because then they can evade the authorities.
I don't think he's saying they should make their operations public.
Not
what
the
he
operations,
is saying,
but how they go about their activities.
Well, up to a point, yes. But I mean, there comes a point where how you're doing it is actually an operation. But people should be able to understand what these powers consist of and what they're used for and why they are necessary. I think all of that does.
Isn't there going to be a danger, though?
And Snowden, really has made that necessary.
And so,
yeah, I do. No, I support all that. I think that all of that's a good idea, and I think it's not a good idea for authority to duck the issue. We do need actually to have this debate.
Okay, Dame Pauline Neville-Jones, thank you very much for your thoughts. Thank you.